Now, the BuckeyeXtra podcast with Rob Oller, Bill Rabinowitz, and Joey Kaufman from the Columbus Dispatch.
Welcome back to the BuckeyeXtra football podcast. It's Thursday, October 24th, preview edition. Ohio State and Nebraska play on Saturday after a idle week. The Buckeyes are back on the field, and we will see how things recovered since Oregon, that loss. And we heard from Ryan Day on Tuesday for the first time since that loss, hinted at some possible changes to the defense. Got a lot of defense questions for Ryan Day, which is a little bit abnormal. But what's your feeling this week?
Well, we got a lot of defense questions because we didn't get a chance to talk to Jim Knowles.
Yeah.
Every other week we've had at least one of the coordinators, Jim Knowles or Chip Kelly, to talk on Tuesdays, and neither one of them showed. It was just Ryan Day and Will Howard. So they had to take all the defensive questions. Look, the offense, didn't score every time, but it scored 31 points against Oregon. I don't think most people think that was the real problem. The problem was that this defense that had been lights out for 5 weeks against bad teams got exposed. And so what are they going to do to fix it? He said, well, first of all, Ryan Day is spending a lot more time in the meeting rooms, the defensive meeting rooms, that is. I think he's going to basically trust Chip Kelly to run the offense, and he's going to oversee the defense. I mean, he's not going to be the coordinator, but he's going to ask a lot of questions and point out different things, and they're going to tweak some things. Nothing major. They're not going to bench people on things like that. Denzel Burke had a bad game, but he's not getting benched. But they're going to change some things. And I think probably the number one thing, tell me if you agree, is they're going to probably change the way they pass rush.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think that coaches, players are on a shorter leash than before. What struck me about Tuesday's press conference was how serious Ryan Day was. Now, whether that's sending a message to his coaches, to his players, he made a comment about how they'd be launching a lot of deep balls, and everybody kind of laughed. And he didn't laugh. he laser stared me down. I think I asked the question. He laser stared me down. He was not jovial. I actually like angry Ryan Day better in terms from a writing standpoint. But yeah, Bill, I reading between the lines, I thought he wants to see a pass rush. There's a couple non-negotiables. One was they got to get to the quarterback. Two was, I read it as they've got to be able to throw deep better. They've got to, pass coverage needs to be better. But I think he gave a one-off to Denzel Burke. Said Denzel Burke's, still a great player. He'll be fine. But he's not a happy camper, which is interesting because we talked about this. Glass half full. They lost by a point to the number one team in the nation now on the road. And yet he saw enough red flags and, cracks in the foundation, I guess, that he was not happy.
I think it's an opportunity for him as well to, I think, push his team a little harder. I mean, some of this, I think, goes into that. But this is a group that for 9 months heard about how they were the most talented roster in college football, and Ohio State was the winner of the offseason. Granted, they hadn't won anything during the actual season. They were not the defending national champions, but the way things had gone for them all offseason, I think this is now a chance for them to maybe try to push their team a little harder, bring them back to earth a little bit. So it goes into that a little bit.
Yeah, I just find it interesting. Again, what two programs? Well, I don't know the answer to this, but I'm speculating here. But Ohio State has $20 million in NIL approximately available.
Yeah.
Well, what other? There's not even a handful. Maybe there's a handful of other programs that have that, but one that does is Oregon because of Phil Knight. And so, Oregon's got their number. Oregon's 2-0 in the last meetings. Now, NIL wasn't a thing the last time, but there's absolutely no reason why Ohio State, with all the resources, with all the money, with the transfers, They need to be. They must be right there. They have to be right there. Whatever right there is, like national championship game, semifinal, they have to be there. There's no excuse, no reason outside of injuries for that to be the case.
I still think they can be, and
Oh
probably.
yeah, I'm not saying they can't. I'm just saying
Like
they have to be.
Well, look, if they lose, let's say, I don't think they can lose. I mean, they can lose this week, I guess. Anytime you step on the field, you could lose, but it would be shocking if they lost this week. Penn State's obviously a tough game. Penn State's on the road. That's a tough place to play. Penn State's number 3 in the country. Do I think Penn State's really the 3rd best team in the country? No, but that's where they're ranked. That's going to be a challenge. Hell, Indiana's going to be a challenge. I mean, it's funny is that Michigan seems to be less of one, but that game's always different. We'll find out. But look, it's really hard to go undefeated. I mean, Ohio State hasn't gone undefeated since 2012. Last time before that was 2002. Last time before that was 1968. I mean, it's really hard to do. And Oregon's a good team, and we were in that environment. That was an unbelievably difficult place to play. Oregon played well. Ohio State didn't play particularly well. I mean, they did in certain ways, but not, I mean, Denzel Burke had a nightmare of a game. The onside kick, off of Caleb Downs. I mean, some fluky things happen. But look, Oregon played well. They deserved to win. I have no issue with that. But like you said, it's a 1-point loss on the road to what's now the number 1 team in the country. There's no need for panic, especially if they use this, as I talked to several players last night, as a blessing in disguise. They want to look back on this as a turning point, kind of like the 14 team did with Virginia Tech. Different circumstances. That was a young team. This is not a young team. But, they've been told for months, this is the greatest team in the history of football, right? I mean, you guys are invincible. Well, they now know they're not. And that's probably a healthy thing.
Joey likes Nebraska. He's intrigued by this Nebraska game. Joseph, what intrigues you?
It's less about Nebraska, and it's more about just how does Ohio State handle its business after a loss, which this is not a situation we get to see very frequently. Ohio State is 56-8 with Ryan Day as their head coach, and only a handful of times have we actually seen Ohio State during a season have to recover from a loss, and the track record is rather mixed. You look at 2021, his 3rd season, they lose to Oregon. They come out the next week with an okay win over Tulsa, and that was when we saw C.J. Stroud's shoulder really hurt him, but it wasn't this really terribly impressive win. And then you had the loss to Michigan at the end of the year, and they come back in that crazy Rose Bowl where it felt like it took them a half to get into it. And then you see probably the best case scenario with their response was the loss to Michigan at the end of 2022, play Georgia well in the title game. Really sort of they leave it all out there on the field, go down to the final play and kick and all that. Then last year, the Cotton Bowl, after the loss to Michigan, just did not look interested in playing Missouri in the Cotton Bowl. So the spectrum has run sort of all over the place how they respond to a loss. And will they mess around with Nebraska, or will they come out and they really sort of kick butt, if you will?
I expect them to come out with the purpose and really, try to take over the game right away and leave no doubt, because that's kind of their second motto. One is, Natty or bust, and the second one is leave no doubt. The Missouri game last year, look, there was no incentive to really play that game, especially after Devin Brown got hurt. I mean, they had to go with a quarterback that was not ready for it. I almost threw that game out. But look, this team still has everything to play for. This game didn't really cost them anything except the margin for error. And so I fully expect them to respond with urgency. And, I kind of in certain ways feel bad for Nebraska because, they're coming off a tough loss. That's a demoralizing loss. You lose 56-7 in Indiana, even obviously a better Indiana than we thought we'd have. That's demoralizing. It's when you lose a game by 1 to the number 1 team in the country, you get pissed off.
I just feel like this is like Groundhog Day. Seems like it's been Groundhog Day for the last 3 years, which is no problem. Ryan Day's record against unranked teams, undefeated. Nebraska's not very good. We thought they were. I mean, there was a time where they could have maybe come in 7-1 or 8-0 to this game, and they've lost 2 now, 5-2. They're not horrible, but they're not Oregon. And when's the test coming? So it's like I'm kind of twiddling my thumbs here.
It's coming next week against Penn State, and this is
Well, it is.
this is
That's
a
fair.
look,
That's fair. It's
and
fair, but
look.
it always is against Penn State. I'm not saying they don't play anybody. I'm just saying that let's not fool ourselves. Nebraska is Michigan State is Rutgers. Well, Rutgers early season. Rutgers awful now, but I think I'm with you, Joey. And you, Bill. I'm a little interested to see what the Ohio State's defense does in terms of pass rush. I think that would be the key for me. Is like, are they going to switch things up? Are they going to go 4-man front? Are they going to try to change it up? Are they going to show different looks? You don't want to show too much and give too much away, but I think maybe we're past the point of like keeping things hidden until the bigger games.
Sure.
I think it's time to throw it out there and see what you got.
That's fair because you're playing Penn State next week, and if you're going to try doing different things with your front and not always feature 4 down line, but maybe line up 3 and feature guys as a stand-up pass rusher and do different stuff, you want to start maybe doing some of that. And they have done some of that in the past too, so that's keep in mind. But I think just the intrigue for me is just how do they come out and play? You mentioned Michigan State and then the competition level they had presented earlier in the season. And no, Michigan State was never a threat to beat Ohio State. But if you go back to that game, you saw some of the concerns in the secondary, how off the corners were playing, how often they were giving up plays on 3rd down. If Michigan State doesn't shoot itself in the foot on a couple of drives, that's a closer game. So I think when you write the story the first half of the season, with the benefit of hindsight, you could start to see some issues for the secondary that presented itself in East Lansing that then arose in Eugene. And so with Penn State coming up next week, I think you're just a little more on guard or on alert for seeing what could pop up for Ohio State, or do they truly come out and have a dominant team? Because if they are a national championship team, you should be able to really turn the page and pummel a Big Ten team like Nebraska and really get after a guy like Dylan Raiola, who threw 3 picks at Indiana and has seemingly hit a freshman wall and is going to be more vulnerable to giving up big plays. I mean, you're playing a freshman quarterback. You should be able to get after him and create some havoc either by sacking, forcing turnovers, fumbles, interceptions, something. So I think that's the thing to me, that's the thing to watch for.
Yeah, Raiola is obviously, people know he was a one-time Ohio State commitment, flipped to Georgia, then flipped to Nebraska. 5-star guy at one point was considered the top quarterback in the country. Julian Sayin actually ended up kind of by most ranking services ended up being the number 1 quarterback. But yeah, Nebraska's just good enough that if you don't play well, they can make you struggle, but they're not nearly good enough that if Ohio State plays the way they can to stay in the game. I mean, we've seen a couple games with Nebraska where Cornhuskers, who clearly were outmanned, hung in and made Ohio State struggle. And then there were other games. There was a streak of games where Ohio State just blew the doors off and really embarrassed Nebraska. Matt Rule is a good coach. I think he's going to bring that program back. I mean, he's not going to bring it back to the golden years. That's not going to happen. But they're going to be a pretty good program. They're not there yet. This is his 2nd year, and Dylan Raiola is a freshman quarterback. We saw what Ohio State did last year to Drew Aller from Penn State. Another 5-star guy who had a terrible game against Ohio State last year. So Ohio State wants to do the same thing to Raiola. I think they can. I mean, I did not like Raiola's fundamentals when I watched him against Indiana Stone off his back foot. He was just kind of lost his fundamentals. And so Ohio State wants to do that again to him. And I talked to Sonny Styles for a couple minutes last night, and he said some of the same things we've said. When you win, some of the mistakes you make get covered over. Well, there's no denying them now. And so to have to face them and correct them is probably a good thing.
Something interesting about Raiola is sort of even as he sort of hit some trouble in recent weeks, he is willing to throw the ball downfield a little bit. So if you are trying to maybe at least see a game in which Ohio State maybe could get tested a little bit, or at least tested in the sense that there will be opportunities where a quarterback will be throwing deep on you. Raiola does do that. I was looking at PFF this morning. He's got 28 passes this year of at least 20 air yards. Only 3 Big Ten quarterbacks have attempted more at that length. So there could be some spots where Raiola goes deep on Ohio State's secondary, and so this is a chance for them to improve upon what they did at Oregon.
I'm not sure this is an elephant in the room situation, but we talked on our last podcast about Jim Knowles and Larry Johnson, that relationship, and how it works. And Ryan Day got asked about that Tuesday. Are they on the same page? How does it work? Who's calling the shots? Are they comfortable with each other? Of course, Ryan Day is not going to tell us, oh, no, they can't stand each other and it's not working. And I'm not saying that's even the case, but, oh, no, they get along. He's been in the meetings. Ryan Day's been in the meetings. Everybody's on the same page. Everything's good. But the fact that that question got asked outside of the three of us, it wasn't one of us three. And so it wasn't like we were just operating in this bubble where we were the only ones thinking this. Someone else asked that question, and that means that question's out there.
Well, I think people remember some of the interaction or the press conference exchanges. There have been a few of them over the years where Larry's been asked about the jack position, which is a Jim Knowles thing that he did at Oklahoma State. I think they called it the Leo there. They had a different title there, but they would use a fourth pass rusher as more of a stand-up hybrid linebacker end. And Larry would be asked about this, and he almost seemed put off by the question or the idea of the jack. So it sort of suggested maybe they were not totally in sync with what they wanted to do with one of the positions on the football field at the line of scrimmage.
Hey, yeah.
That was an odd situation. And Knowles did that a lot at Oklahoma State. So what he ran at Oklahoma State was much more of a 3-3-5 or a 4, and now it's pretty much strictly just a 4-2-5.
Here's the deal. Relationships are hard, right? Relationships are hard, and just because everybody says it's kumbaya, is it kumbaya? You've got a guy in Jim Knowles who has wanted to be a head coach. He interviewed at Duke. Ryan Day has said Jim Knowles is the head coach of the defense. What's Larry Johnson think about that? Larry Johnson is a veteran, has been around forever, well regarded. He has his ideas of how things should work. So I'm not saying there is an issue, but there's definitely a reason to wonder if there's an issue when you've got two personalities, two veterans. I mean, let's not be naive here. These are real people, real humans. Relationships are hard. Power is hard. Control is an issue in everything in life. And so how does that play out on Ohio State defense?
Well, look, you have a really good defensive line. You have two very good ends, Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau. You have a potential first-round pick in Tyleik Williams. Ty Hamilton's a terrific player. You have depth. You have Caden Curry and Kenyatta Jackson behind them. They're the Rushman package. So whether they call it a jack or not, I mean, they've got pass rushers to put pressure on the quarterback. Why they couldn't get to Dillon Gabriel, I'm sure that they've dissected it. When they got some pressure, I mean, JT, when I watched the game again, JT Tuimoloau had a lot of pressure. He actually was pretty impactful. He just didn't have a sack. But you've got to find a way to disrupt them. Dillon Gabriel, to his credit, would step out of the pocket, step up in the pocket. He found a way to get around the pass rush. But then there were other times on those deep balls, they didn't get a pass rush. It wasn't like he got hit as he threw. I mean, he had time to throw. And that's the thing that's concerning. And Joey, I think you looked at the stat a few days ago that in these games that Ohio State has lost, when their defense has faltered, the sacks just haven't been there.
Yeah, I mean, you count it on one hand. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but it was less than 5. It was just in all these games against Michigan, Oregon, they've not been able to get sacks. And Nebraska's a team they should be able to do that. Nebraska's allowed 14 sacks this year, middle of the pack in the Big Ten. So this is not a situation where you're going up against an offensive line that is going to be so stout where you can't get pressure or get a guy. So this is a chance for them to try to obviously do that.
I guess that gives you confidence, but to beat a dead horse, what does it mean if they get 4 or 5 sacks in this game? I mean, Nebraska is not great. Nebraska, like you said, they're okay. It builds your confidence.
It's more of a situation where if they
don't get them,
if it's not a game where you look at the stat sheet and Rail's not under pressure that much and is only sacked once, that would be the concerning point. It's not.
I think that's fair. That's fair.
They got to create some turnovers. I mean, they lost the game because they essentially lost the turnover battle. They lost the Judkins fumble, which was a terrific play by the defense or by the linebacker to just strip the ball from them. I mean, that was just a great play by the linebacker. And then the onside kick, which technically is not a turnover, really is a turnover. It's tough to beat a team on the road, a good team on the road when you do that. So, there have been games where Ohio State's gotten the turnovers, gotten the sacks. Well, let's see them do it against a decent team. I'm not saying Nebraska's that level. Look, the big test is next week. We know that's really the big test. But they have to show that they handled the Oregon loss the right way. That instead of getting down in the dumps, that it inspired them and motivated them. And everything they've said this week is that this could be the best thing to happen to them, as painful as it was. You need to see that. You need to see that on the field. That, okay, this is a re-energized, refocused team that is the slightest bit complacent. And I'm not saying they were before, but I think this is a statement game, and like, we're still Ohio State and you're not, kind of thing.
I want to ask you guys about this too, because I found this interesting Tuesday. And that Will Howard said, well, yeah, they haven't unveiled the deep ball that much. Part of it is the way the teams are defending them, not giving them the deep ball. Didn't seem real concerned. Now, he is the guy throwing the ball, so maybe he's not going to throw himself under the bus and say, well, I just need to be better at it. But he made it sound like it just hasn't been part of the arsenal yet. Ryan Day, on the other hand, clearly was like, yeah, that needs to be improved. We are going to launch deep balls in practice today. I mean, my takeaway on his comment was it is not up to snuff, and we need to get it there. So it wasn't like, well, we're not doing this. It's other teams have been defending it, and that's why he was like, it needs to be better. So you've kind of got the coach saying one thing and the quarterback sort of saying another. What's your take on the deep ball? And this is, again, broken record. I think they're going to try to throw deep against Nebraska. That would be my take on the situation.
Yeah, I think they will too. Will Howard threw deep, did have a completion to Jeremiah Smith that wasn't thrown, but he was hit as he threw. I mean, or hit right after he threw. So, I mean, that was, I think, after Josh Simmons had left the game, and he got pressure from the blind side, and just as he released it, he got hit. So that probably prevented him from following through the way he wanted to. But Will Howard's really good at a lot of things. I would not put the deep ball at the top of that list, or even in the middle of that list. I mean, I think he can do it. I mean, this is not a guy who doesn't have an arm. But you're right, there's no denying it, that there have been several deep balls this year where he's underthrown. Maybe he's still not used to the Ohio State receiver's speed. I don't know. But I think he can throw it.
The other complicating factor in this is, as far as if this is going to be a game where you're really going to stretch the field vertically, is you have to have time to do that. And they are breaking in a new left tackle in Zed Mahalski. And whether they want to maybe simplify things and lean on some shorter stuff, some screens, get the ball out quicker, run the ball, I think that's certainly going to factor into things as well, just because you have a guy who's been around the program. He's a fourth year with Ohio State, but Zed Mahalski's making his first start Saturday against Nebraska.
I'd like to see a game where they just run the ball. I mean, you've got all these weapons, wide receiver, but just like
you wanted the deep ball. You wanted the deep ball, and now you want them to run the ball.
Well, that's fair. I mean, I'm not saying this game. It's just a game, because I do think they need to prove something with the deep ball. But just a game, maybe it'll be Purdue.
Yeah.
Where they just pound it. I mean, what's been the narrative, whether fair or not, the last couple years is, toughness, and they talk about balance, and they've had balance. They had I don't know, a couple games ago, 200 passing, 200 and some passing, 200 and some running. It was fine, but I don't know. It just seems I keep thinking about the Michigan games, and in those games, it's like Michigan pounds the rock and does it successfully, and Ohio State doesn't. And I just think they have so many. They almost have too many weapons. It's impossible, I guess, to say they have too much talent, but they want to spread the wealth. But sometimes just give that ball to Judkins and Henderson, and hell, give it to Gerd. Let's see some fullback action there, and just impose your will. I can't remember the last game where it was really just impose your will.
That's what you want to see.
Well, can they do it? That's the question.
It'll be. You talk about toughness. I do think this game, in some ways, is about toughness and the mental side of it. Just as much as that, just the resiliency that this team will show. Really, both teams. That's sort of the X factor in this game. Ohio State coming off a loss, as we talked about earlier. Nebraska's coming off their biggest loss in the year. Last year, they started 5-3 and then lost the rest. They lost out and missed a bowl game. This is their longest bowl drought since the 1950s, and they're trying to snap that. And they couldn't get to that sixth win last year, and now they're staring down a tough schedule, and they're 5-2. So Nebraska's in a tough spot. They're testing their resolve. Ohio State wants to maybe flex its muscles. I think certainly who shows up is going to be as telling as anything.
Well, I think I had it like 40. I had some 42-10 or something like that. So my pick was that it's not really much of a game.
You expect the Buckeyes to shine, or was you?
Yes, or just take care of business. They'll take care of business.
Or did you pick Nebraska 42, Ohio State 10?
No, I did not pick that. I did not pick Nebraska to win. This was not an upset special. Yeah. So I think everything will be fine. Right now, it's basically keep guys healthy. That's where you are. Keep guys healthy this week. Win the game. Go to State College. And win one in front of the former president. Is that news out yet, or are we keeping that down low?
No, that was Yahoo Sports. Ross Dellinger said that Donald Trump is expected to, or they're making plans to clear his schedule. Maybe he'll be at that game. If that's the case, we probably should start leaving for State College in a couple days. Get there early. There'll be, I suspect, increased security. But that's next week's game. Ohio State, Nebraska, Saturday at noon on Fox. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the BuckeyeXtra Football Podcast. I'm Joey Kaufman. That was Rob Oller and Bill Rabinowitz. Thanks for dropping by.
Be sure and subscribe to the BuckeyeXtra Podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.